Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I am your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Well, hello, Judy, and hello, viewers and listeners. Our topic for today is...
My wife found out I cross-dress. Help!
Oh, my goodness. Not that unusual a phenomenon, actually. I've encountered it quite a bit in my work over 25 years. I'm not a specialist in this, but it certainly has come up, and so we will talk about that. Before we do that, we have some exciting news to share with folks. There was an article about us in 7 Days, which is a wonderful newspaper in Vermont, did a feature on us, and when we post this, we will put a link to 7 Days. I don't want to say what it is for fear of saying it wrong, but we'll put it on the screen. 7 Days, 7 Days VT or something like that. Whatever it is, if you look for 7 Days newspaper in Vermont, you will find it, and you will find a profile on us and on our podcast.
Right, it's their marriage and Valentine's Day love show.
Because we are, yes,
publication.
We're recording this on February 10th of 2022, which is just a few days before Valentine's Day. Mm-hmm. So that was really exciting. And
yes, it was. So we're one of the featured people that they had.
Yeah.
And our podcast, because it's on fire.
Absolutely. So that was fun, and we hope you will share the news of that. We've been putting it on our social media posts. We hope you'll share that when you see it as well, and of course, tell your friends about our podcast. There's more and more folks finding out about it. I mentioned this. I don't know if I mentioned this before. I saw on one of the things you can use to track where you're getting viewers and listeners. Apparently, if I can believe this, we are pretty popular in France.
Ah oui?
Bonjour.
Ah, bonjour, bonsoir, mon ami française.
Yeah, which
Mes amis français.
Mes amis français, which pretty well exhausts my high school French as well. Yeah, yours is better than mine.
I love France.
Yes, indeed. We've been there. Anyway, so welcome to our hordes of listeners in France. And other places too, but I was kind of surprised to see that. Sort of interesting. Anyway, the other thing we want to mention before we get going on our topic is the book that started it all, which is...
Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back.
So, if you like the podcast, folks, you love the book. Or if you love the podcast, you like the book. What can I tell you? Anyway, check it out. It's available anywhere books are sold. Also available as an audiobook. That really, I've mentioned this before, that seems to be the popular...
yes, it is.
The popular whatever format
also
these days.
Fire.
Also on fire, yes. So check that out. And then finally, we've got to mention our podcast merch. For those of you who are just listening, we are holding up our beautiful Couples Therapy in 7 Words mugs in the 15-ounce and...
the 11-ounce
sizes.
It has our Be Kind, Don't Panic, and Have Faith message on one side and our beautiful Couples Therapy in 7 Words logo on the other side.
And the logo was designed by none other than Judy, and it's a beautiful logo. So let's talk about this issue. Now, this came in as a letter, as I've mentioned, and we'll go into the letter pretty soon, I guess. As I've mentioned, I have encountered this quite a number of times over the years in my practice, where the typical issue is a man has been cross-dressing, which is to say wearing women's clothing, often sort of, lingerie or underwear or things of that sort. And his wife doesn't, we're talking about a married man married to a woman.
Right.
We're talking almost always about a heterosexual, married, cisgendered man married to a woman. And his wife doesn't know about it and comes to find out. And then the stuff hits the fan. I guess we're doing this PG rated, so I won't say what else hits the fan, but it hits the fan.
It hits the fan.
And how it hits the fan depends on the folks, of course. It always depends on the particular people. And, before we get any farther in this, I will simply note, I kind of mentioned parenthetically right at the beginning, this is not a particular area of expertise for me. So folks, this is not like expert opinion coming from me. This is, I'm an experienced couples therapist, but
and
I'm not
you've had that before.
And I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it happen, of course.
See, I don't know what I can add to this conversation because I have very little experience with this.
But what you
which
can...
is to say, I don't think I have any.
Yeah, well, I mean, with any of the dozens of men you've been married to.
Or, like usually you hear about, stuff from your friends about what, their partners' things are. But I don't think I've come across cross-dressing.
Yeah.
So either my friends aren't telling me about it, or their husbands aren't doing it. So I don't know.
Well, I did a very quick little bit of research in preparation for this.
Okay.
And I found the incidence. Some article was estimating. Some people did research on this. That among men, I think in the United States, I believe that's what they were talking about. It was anywhere between 2 and 10% of married heterosexual men cross-dress to some extent.
Wow.
Now, so it's not a rare phenomenon by any means. And, that explains why I see it in the office occasionally, So, as I say, I'm not an expert on this. The interesting thing, though, this, like everything else I encounter, whatever the generalities are, it always depends on the particular people involved. I've seen a whole range of responses to this, like I've seen a whole range of responses to pretty much anything else you can think of. So it really does depend on the individuals. But there are some interesting things that come up. When you were saying you're not sure you have much to contribute because you don't have personal experience of it or hearing it from your friends, I will note that what you absolutely can offer is you can imagine what would it be like if you discovered I'm doing this? Judy, I have a secret to tell. No, I don't actually. But funny thing is, we're together a lot. Yeah. But no, I don't happen to do this. But you can imagine what that might be like and what some of the issues that could come up would be. And so you can probably relate to the wife of the man who wrote the letter that we're going to get into. Do you want to get into the listener letter?
Sure. Why don't we do that? Okay, so Anonymous writes, Dear Dr. Chalmer, I need help immediately. I am a married man in my late 50s with what I thought was a very happy marriage. I love my wife of 27 years and our 2 high school age sons. I have been dressing in women's clothes all my adult life. 2 nights ago, when everyone was out, I got out my box of dress-up clothes and proceeded to put them on. My wife came back earlier than expected and found me in high heels and sexy women's lingerie. Up till then, she did not know about this secret of mine. Her first reaction was shock, then anger, then confusion. She asked me if I wanted to transition to being a woman, and when I said I don't, asked if I'm gay. When I told her I'm not, she said she doesn't know if she can believe me. She said if I can keep this a secret from her, what other secrets have I been keeping? She said she needs me to move out of our room while she tries to make sense of this. She said she doesn't know if she can stay married to me. Dr. Chalmer, I have no desire to become a woman. I'm a heterosexual male. I love my wife. We have had a good and satisfying marriage and sex life until now. I know it was wrong of me not to tell her, but I was afraid, frankly, that she would react the way she's reacting. I really do not want to lose her. What can I do?
Great question. Yeah, and so, what can he do? I mean, this is an issue, says the couple therapist over here. This is an issue for a couples therapist, perhaps. He's not saying he's conflicted about his own use of this. Right. He's not considering it something that is somehow, mentally ill or perverted or something like that. And in that respect, most of us in the field would agree with him.
Well, yeah, but there is an element of shame if he hasn't wanted to tell her after all these years.
Of course, but the shame is precisely because of her shock and disapproval. Yeah. So, in other words, he's not saying he doesn't think there's something wrong with himself. And I'm sitting here thinking, that wouldn't be a very useful approach because it's the kind of thing that is not that, even if it were uncommon, but it's not that uncommon. And there are, again, as I said earlier, there's probably as many different reasons why people do that as there are people. But a lot of times men will do this because they find it attractive, they find it sexy, they find it comforting, they find it whatever they find it. Interesting that he's saying he's had a good and satisfying marriage, but he's never told his wife about this. And they've been married for 27 years. How he's managed to not be caught up till now is kind of amazing.
It is, yes.
But, that happens often.
Who knows? Maybe he traveled a lot and did it when he was on the road.
It could be, or,
and now COVID, he's stuck in the house.
Who knows? Exactly. How do you know what I do when you have your regular Tuesday night mahjong thing and I go out and you don't know what I'm wearing? You do not know these things. So, and slightly facetious here, but the thing he's encountering here is her reaction. And so what I'm curious about, from your perspective as cisgendered heterosexual woman married to a man,
Yeah.
If not to be silly about it, if you found me doing that,
Right.
what would can you imagine what your reaction would be?
Who? No. I can't imagine, because I don't think I would know until I was in that situation.
Yeah, isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to think I would not have as great a reaction as I might have had when I was younger.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Why do you say that?
I think I've matured.
Yeah. You don't freak out as easily.
No,
Yeah.
I don't freak out as easily. I think that I'm more accepting now,
Mm-hmm.
and more accepting of differences.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I'd probably want to know why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a natural question,
Of course. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yes, indeed.
I don't know how I really know, which is to say.
Of course you don't. Well,
I could totally freak out and like be like his wife and say, move out, or probably could have said move out of the house. You know, it's
sure.
like I don't know if I want you around in my bed anymore.
Well, exactly. But see, that's what I think is so interesting. And I draw on many experiences I've had over the years with different couples dealing with things along this sort of issue, because I've worked with numbers of couples where the woman in the situation really is trying to be as understanding as she can be.
Yeah.
And yet there is this thing that I don't pathologize this either, it's like there are plenty of heterosexual women who would say, I have a hard time wanting to have sex with someone who wants to look like a woman or dress like a woman.
Well, you know what I'm having a harder time with? The fact that he didn't tell her all these years. So that if I discovered that, that's what would get to me, is that you didn't trust me enough, that you felt you could confide in me.
Yeah.
Because as we've talked about on the show, intimacy and stability, and how successful relationships rely on intimacy. And that's a pretty big and intimate part of a person's life. And for him to conceal that for over 25 years is, he says they had a good marriage, but he's keeping a huge secret from her.
And absolutely. And I can well imagine, if I put myself in a similar situation, I could imagine that sort of hurt and shock that, you didn't trust me with this information. You didn't trust me to be intimate and tell me these things.
Right.
It's interesting because I also can sympathize. I mean, it's a problem, isn't it? I can sympathize with his worry about that, precisely because he does love his wife, didn't want to lose her. And so worried that if indeed he shared that, look at what happened. It's like now she's wondering, I don't know if I can stay married to him.
Yeah.
That's a really tough thing.
Well, that's, I think, the betrayal too. I mean, they could have worked it. He could have worked this out years ago with her. Well, I shouldn't say. I don't know. Sometimes you have to be there.
You have to be
it's
there.
It's like with an alcoholic or any type of addiction.
Yeah.
You're in denial much of the time.
Well, sure. I mean, he legitimately didn't know. And look what happened when she did. And again, and of course, my heart goes out to her as well, because she's trying to figure this out. The little bit of research I mentioned, and again, this squares with what I've seen in the office. The women I've talked to in couples where this is happening, it's not that they like it; it's that they tolerate it. It's like, okay, I can deal with this. It's not unlike men who are really into porn,
right,
and women who don't like it,
right,
but can get past the feeling that it's cheating, or get past the feeling that, oh no, why is he looking at at those women, when does he think I'm not enough or something?
Yeah.
If they can get past that, still lots of the women I've talked to, I don't want to think about it much. It's like, okay.
Well, yeah, because because speaking as a heterosexual woman, I want a man. I don't want to be in bed with somebody who's going to be girly.
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly it, isn't it? there's research I love to tell folks about. I remember reading about some number of years ago. I wish I could cite it exactly, but I don't remember the citation. But it's research that was done where they were studying a bunch of couples who were to varying degrees striving to not be governed by traditional gender roles. It's not that they were shunning them completely, it's they were saying, we're not going to assume that, it's always the man that does the yard work and always the woman that does the feminine stuff,
Right.
and we're not going to impose that on our children and, people who strive for that.
Right.
It was really interesting what they found, I thought, because they found that, and this is all, aggregate stuff, so different couples reacted different ways. But what they found was, in general, the couples that were rigidly in gender roles that they just couldn't get out of, a lot of the women were just pissed off. I mean, they weren't happy, they felt oppressed. I mean, it could be really difficult. Not all, because there were some couples that's what they wanted to do. But a lot of couples were not happy that way. The couples that really strove for to be governed by gender assumptions as little as possible, reported generally being happier in the sense that they were less in conflict about, who did what, that kind of thing. They just worked it out based on their particular individual, preferences. They had one problem. Guess what the problem was?
Sex?
Sex. Yeah. They would report their sex lives were meh. They just weren't there.
All of them, or?
Aha. Maybe I've told you this story. I don't remember if I've told you this before, but that's a great, all of them? No, not all of them, because there was a subset that would, and I remember reading about it, whoever wrote this up in some article, was saying they would sheepishly report to the researchers, well, actually, we really do have a great sex life because we play power games in bed. They'll play kind of like, it doesn't have to be like full-fledged dominant submission type things or bondage or things like that, but they would play games where there would be a clear power difference. And what was interesting was the researchers, kind of incorporated all this, and they sort of found a sweet spot in the data. They said what they found was the couples that seemed to be happiest across the board, including their sex life, it wasn't 100-0 split in terms of, masculine, feminine, and it wasn't 50-50 either. It was 60-40.
Which way?
And both ways. In other words, what they found was, and I think they described it in this way, the man earned 60% of the money, and the woman did 60% of the traditionally feminine chores. Which meant the man did 40% of the traditionally feminine chores. You know what I mean? Right. It wasn't rigid, but there was a definite tendency. And what they said, and I always like to mention, as I recall, some of this research I believe was done at the University of Vermont. Again, apologies to the researchers because I'm not coming up with the right citation here, but that's what I'm remembering. And they were women researchers, which I think is significant because this wasn't like the male gaze. This was women studying this. And what they said was, among heterosexual men and women, the women wanted the men to seem like men. They wanted to see that those suggestions of masculinity. They didn't want them to be, toxic masculinity. They didn't want them to be, but they wanted them to seem like men. And of course the men wanted the women to seem like women. They're looking for those signs because that's what heterosexuality implies. You're looking for the difference there. And it's interesting, and of course in the case of cross-dressing, obviously the problem that lots of women have with it, the reason it's about tolerating it if they are heterosexual women is, these are women who, even if they were interested in having sex with a woman, I'm speculating they would actually want it to be a woman. They wouldn't want it to be a man dressed up like a woman.
Exactly.
It's like, no, if you're going to do the woman thing, I can do that. I can be turned on by that, but it's got to be a woman, And it's a tricky business. So, getting back to our writer here, Anonymous, didn't want to understand that. What is he to do, I think what he needs to do is be as clear as possible with himself. If I'm describing intimacy, be as honest as possible with himself and with his wife, and invite her, if she will do so, to do some couples therapy, if that, if that would work for them. From the sound of her, as his description, she doesn't sound like she went like totally off the deep end the way some people can. I don't tend to see that much. Well, because they're not coming to see couples therapists. You know what I mean? The folks where somebody just, I have heard stories of fundamentalist families, for example, somebody coming out as gay or somebody coming out as trans or somebody in a situation like this, and they are just run out of town, and it's in a very cruel fashion.
Yeah.
But they're not consulting the likes of me either. The folks who are consulting me are folks like this man and maybe his wife,
Right.
who are saying this is really painful and we don't know what to do. And that's, says the couples therapist, hey, I know, how about couples therapy,
Well, yes, because they have a lot to unpack. First, I don't know if he's even interested in finding out why he does what he does.
Yeah.
With the cross-dressing, or maybe it's just something that he's accepted, but she's got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
He totally took her by surprise. So they have that she's got to find out. She's got to come to terms with why her husband is dressing like this. Plus, the fact that they've had this marriage that they both thought was intimate, but it really wasn't, because he has this whole other side of his life that he wasn't sharing with her all these years.
Yeah, which seems to be important enough to him that he would take this kind of risk, which also, again, is a story I've often heard.
Well, he's not the one who initiated the risk. She found out.
Well, yes, exactly.
So,
I mean, the risk he was taking was being found out.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows what the reaction would have been if he had told her himself.
His worry, and I think it's it's not unrealistic. His worry was that if he had told her early on, she would have said, okay, this relationship is going nowhere, let me find somebody else.
Right.
Because a lot of women would do that.
Right.
And so there was that worry. And then there's the worry once they've built a life together, then he's worrying, oh no, is she going to, is she going to throw him over? It is interesting because I also have met, I'm trying to think, I have met numbers of women who have tolerated it. That's probably the best word. Who've been okay with it, who've tried, even sometimes who have tried to participate in whatever way, would you find it a turn on if we had sex while you were dressed that way? Some of those same women said, boy, that's a tall order. It's like, that's not what I'm...
Well, see, now here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
If he could have, had on one of their sex nights, that he bought her some very sexy lingerie, and maybe bought himself some satin boxers or something, sexy guy lingerie. I don't know, underwear. And then while they're dressed up in that, he could suggest, oh, why don't we switch? And turn it into a sex game. And I don't know.
Interesting.
So,
very interesting
that
question.
That might be a way to bring it out in your in your life without actually having to come out and say, "Guess what? I'm a cross-dresser." But that could be a way of introducing. I find that very sexy to see you in my underwear, and I feel very sexy being in your underwear. And saying, "How do you feel about that?" And she might, and then he could gauge if she's open to something like that.
Yeah. And of course, in this particular situation, he would still be faced with, even if that sounds like a great, a great approach. The one thing that's missing from it in this situation is he's been lying to her by omission for years. Do you know what I mean?
Right. I'm just saying, if he had done that
early on,
a little bit, even 10 years or 5 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was, if he kind of did that instead of just hiding it. But maybe that's the thrill of it. Maybe maybe hiding it heightens it too.
That could well be the case, actually. Yeah, that certainly is often the case. With
the risk of being found out.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something with the heightening, and then if she knows about it, it's not going to be that exciting anymore.
That could well be true. It's interesting that they, he said we had a good and satisfying marriage and sex life until now, and it's interesting to imagine. Okay, they had sex they both enjoyed, it felt good, and then he had this other thing that he just couldn't quite get through his marriage.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going and having an affair with someone, which certainly would be a whole other can of worms.
Right.
But he was doing something that he didn't want his wife to know about, and now she's found out. So,
Well, I guess in some ways it's like an affair because he's like cheating on her by having a sex, like some other type of sexual part of him with something, somebody, some other persona, somebody else. It's not like another person. It's not like actually having an affair with a person, but it's that sense that, yeah, there's like cheating going on. Isn't that interesting? I hadn't thought of it that way.
It's, well, a lot of women would experience it that way.
Right.
Though also a lot of women would experience a man's masturbating as cheating. I've heard that one, which, or, or again, being turned on by porn, or thinking about, are you thinking about any other woman's body, when you're masturbating? That sort of thing could be considered cheating, or it could be considered just, normal.
Well, I was going to say it's only cheating if you feel like you have to hide it from your partner. But if you could do it with your partner, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, and that's really what you're suggesting is that sense of what if we built this into our play, and then of course he wouldn't be in the situation.
Right.
But he also might not be married to his wife. I mean, again, that's the thing
true.
he's wrestling
so
with.
I'm putting this out there for some of you men that might be listening who are cross-dressers and are afraid of getting discovered. This is a way that you can work it into. So women, if your husband suddenly wants to put your underwear on and ask you to wear his, that might be telling you something. You heard it here first.
You heard it here first, yeah. And it's fascinating that you say that, and you said you don't have experience with this yourself. Right. I mean, I don't particularly have that interest, so you haven't really experienced it. But it is an interesting, it's an interesting way of sort of reframing the whole business,
right?
Which of course is often a very useful thing to do when you're dealing with something that otherwise just seems like, I don't know what sense to make of this. So the other thing I want to mention in the letter, which is of course just perennially this is the case. She said, if I can keep this a secret from her, what other secrets have I been keeping? That's a classic. Oh my God, you keep a secret from, keep a secret. There's such a thing as keeping things private because it's sort of sexy that way, that we don't know everything about each other.
Right.
But toxic secrets, which is to say something that if you found out, you'd say, oh my God, who are you?
Right.
That's the kind of thing that you're dealing with here. And it's a major issue in trusting someone. Absolutely. And it is kind of a classic. It's like, if you keep a big secret from your spouse that, if they knew they'd be really upset, you're cruising for bruising. Right. You know what I mean? That's you're headed for trouble. Right. And yet, again, as I said, my heart goes out to both parties in this case because I can see why he would do that. Yeah. Yeah. It is a tricky thing. So I hope, Anonymous, I hope this is helpful. I mean, I realize when someone writes to us, it's funny, I need help immediately, but of course, writing to us is not going to get help immediately. He needs to, call a therapist, and of course, therapists aren't all that available these days. So.
Although we did get it 2 days ago, so that's pretty immediate.
It is pretty immediate, yeah.
So anonymous.
That's true. Yeah.
Getting to it as soon as we can.
Yeah, good point. So.
If you have a question that you would like us to talk about on the air, you can always email us. There are 2 addresses. There's Bruce at couplestherapyin7words.com or Judy at couplestherapyin7words.com, or you can go to our website, couplestherapyin7words.com.
I wonder if, I keep thinking, I wonder if we should get a hold of the domain CTISW, couples therapy, because that's a lot fewer syllables.
Yes, it is.
But by golly, you'll remember that. You only have to type it once, then your computer knows it, then you're all set. Right?
Exactly.
It's good. Indeed, and when you go to our website, couplestherapyin7words.com, you'll see there is, you have access there to all of our episodes. You'll have also a way of contacting us, short of having to remember those email addresses. And you can even sign up for a time to be interviewed. There's a link there to our calendar so that you can sign up for a time. And when you do that, it'll ask you, what do you want to be interviewed about? We will ask you. There'll be a question there, and that's how we'll know if we think you'll be a good fit. So please do get in touch with us and just give us some feedback. Let us know if you're enjoying this or other kinds of suggestions, people you think we ought to interview, all that stuff. Please do that. And don't forget about
Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back.
And that is the book that started it all. It's available in paperback, as I'm showing here to those of you watching. It's available in Kindle. It's available as an audiobook as well. And I am indeed working on another book. And I'm just sort of sneaking that in a little bit. I'm working on another book, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be likely another year or two before it actually shows up. That's how books work. But I'm working on it.
Yeah.
So until next time,
remember, be kind,
don't panic,
and have faith.